Welcome to the Angie Creates podcast. I'm your host, Angie Wang. In this podcast, I interview curious humans on how they become the most alive versions of themselves through creative expressions like movement, art, and writing. 欢迎来到 Angie Creates， 我是你的主持人安吉。在这个节目呢，我喜欢和来宾们聊聊关于数位游牧、写作、艺术和身体训练的不同主题，探索如何活出最精彩的人生。My guest today is Valerie. Valerie is at Vals_Pals_ on Twitter. She is a computer science graduate, work in finance, and a writer. And this might be the wrong order because later you might find out in our conversation. She should be introduced as she is a writer and a computer science major and working finance. That we will talk about later. Valerie is relentless in mining her emotions. She writes personal essays about sticky taboo topics that people don't normally talk about, such as jealousy of fellow creatives or feeling like a failure for not winning a status game. This is very interesting for me, or interesting is the wrong word. This is something that I resonated a lot because we both graduated from Ivy League school, but we have a lot of self-doubt and sometimes call us, this is what you're going to find out in the podcast today, a piece of shit all the time. And this is like, when I was reading through, every time I read through Valerie's article, I feel very sad about like how we growing up as an Asian kid, like the fact that we don't get a lot of love as a child give us so much obstacles about building our own self-worth in the future. Oh my God, I'm already directing our conversation in a certain way. No, we're going to start on a blank page. Today, we're going to chat about Valerie's creative journey, being an Asian female creator, and Asian parent-children relationship, and so much more. Welcome to the show, Valerie.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I think that was such a spot-on intro. It was like simultaneously very funny and also, I guess, a little sad. Like, I guess the feeling you get when you read my writing a little. Yep.
That captures what is it like to be a Chinese kid growing up in the States, and me, like a Chinese immigrant in the States. Like we sometimes laugh at our own abuse. Like the abuse that we suffer from.
Yeah.
This is the only way to survive. All right. I don't have a box of tissues here, but I might need to grab some later. You might want to do that too. We don't know. It could be a fun conversation. It could be a healing conversation. It could be an angry conversation. We'll see where it takes us.
Sounds good. I'm excited. I'm curious.
Why don't we start with when Valerie is a kid? What do you remember about her?
Yeah, I think one of the salient memories, like, I remember is being in 5th grade and getting my report card. We were graded on a 1 to 3 basis in our elementary school report cards, and with 3 being the highest. And I just remember how on edge I was as a 5th grader when I got a 2. And so basically my report card was mostly 3s, and then I got a few 2s, and I just remember being very upset that I got a few of those 2s, and then I tried to ask my teacher like how I could improve and stuff like that, and she told me to chill out. And it's like one of those things where I'm like, this probably wasn't a salient memory to me growing up, but in terms of like when I look back on my childhood, that is a very salient one, just the way that I, independent of my parents, really wanted to do like exceptionally well, like, and get sort of like validation from like teachers and like authorities.
I just realized this interview might be more like a conversation instead of me interviewing Valerie. I just feel like I have so much to say too. So pardon me. Yesterday I was just talking to Paul, my husband, about how specific memories in childhood that is totally maybe it's totally forgotten by our parents now, but are still so emotionally salient for us. And when I think about childhood, it's just a few memory, like very, very few memories comes out, and it's always the same one. I want to present myself as a nice kid, and what they do is just completely ignore me. It's so unimportant. Most people probably just move on the next minute, but it's probably how I attribute my feeling lack of love, feeling not being loved, feeling like not belonging in a group to this memory a lot, and some others too. How do you feel when you look at your childhood picture?
It's weird because, like, one hand, I don't think my childhood was like completely or even mostly unhappy, but it just like whenever I think because like in the past few years, whenever I was really upset, I like found this one meditation that was an inner child meditation. So, and one of the things it had you do was think about yourself, like think about an image from yourself when you were younger. So I associate my childhood with being sad because I was sad like a few years ago. But I think when I think about my childhood, or like when I think about my like looking at an image of myself, the reality is that for the most part I was pretty happy, or at least like I was mostly living like a slightly uptight kid life. And then occasionally I like had like difficult moments with my parents.
That's one thing that surprised me too. I think that because of the past few years healing journey for me has been focused so much on the suffering that led to where I was before. And when I went back to Taiwan, I had this chance of sorting out family photos and digitize them. I go through all my childhood photos and I look so happy all the time. I'm just like a crazy happy kid who looks super messy the whole time because I was playing so hard. Let's stop talking about me.
Okay,
talk about you are. Oh wait, so you major in math and statistics. And how did you start writing? And why did you start writing?
I guess it's kind of funny because it starts with it starts in high school from like being an overachiever a bit. So basically, this time in high school, rather than being graded out of 3, like I was graded out of 6, and like basically, 6s were pretty rare, and I was obsessive a bit with my grades, and I really wanted a 6. And in like 10th grade English class, we had the whole, like all the 10th graders, we would go through like a unit of creative writing in our fall term. And I had a teacher who like, I think had much more of a literary bent and like cared about very like sharp, witty pieces. And I think I don't know, I think like my impression in order to get a 6 was that like I need to just kind of write a little on like writing that like really went for the throat to some degree and didn't hold back. And like, so I wrote a bunch of like satires, like satirizing some of like the administrative people at my school, and among other things, my teacher really liked that. But more so than that, like I realized like, oh, even though I'm kind of doing this for a grade, I genuinely really, really like the process of writing. And I think that was like my first brush with 10th grade was like for creative writing. Although now that I'm thinking about it, I guess in 9th grade I also tried to write a novel, and that went horribly. Because I used to read a lot of young adult novels, starting in like middle school, and like I had like this blog where I would review books, and so like I think that like all was part of my interest, but it wasn't until like 10th grade, when I was trying to grade hack a little, that I like spent like significant amounts of time like writing, and then realizing that it was extremely fun in its own right.
So after that, did you keep writing?
Yeah, so after that, there was like this. So there are like a bunch of high school summer camps, and like for creative writers. One of them is like the Iowa Writers Workshop. I never got into that one. That was the most prestigious. There was one called like Kenyon Review. University of Virginia has a creative writing program, like just like, a few weeks long. So I went to one of those, and then met a bunch of people. But I think the thing that kept it alive outside of that was definitely just like, I think I just realized like I really like to write poetry, or like I really like to like try to write like stories just in my own time. So I would occasionally do that. There's also a period in college where I was like taking like a creative writing workshop like every term. I think I did that maybe like 7 terms out of 8 or something like that, or 6 terms out of 8. And I think that kept it alive. Like just doing some like creative writing, where basically I'd like go in, like realize like, oh, this term I'm finally going to write my novel, or this term I'm finally going to do this, and none of those things actually happened. But at the very least, my writing got better. And to this day, I have not been published like in the way that I like anticipated for myself. But other interesting things have happened.
So, do you also keep writing when you are a math and statistics major?
Yeah, so like basically I would write like in like the creative writing workshops I would take.
Mm-hmm.
And like basically like for a lot of those workshops, it's like the goal was like you do a few writing exercises and stuff, but like for the most part you'd be working on one piece that you try to polish a lot. So I wrote a lot of fiction pieces in those workshops. There was a time where like I actually think it was for like most of college, like 3 years or something, or 3.5 years, where I was writing mostly about like semi-autographical pieces about girls who were very angsty and who did math and had troubling relationships with men. But basically, I wrote a lot of stuff like that, like for a lot of college, and I think that shaped a lot of my later writing, because I would just like, I couldn't help it. I was just writing like autobiographical stuff and getting it edited, and like I think that helped me like grow as a writer a lot.
Mm-hmm. You say you couldn't help but write about it. Why is that?
I think that's a very good question. I think it's something to do with my personality. I'm pretty open. I don't really hide too much, but I think beyond that, I feel like I'm using writing a lot to figure out my life. So even when I was writing fiction, I think there is this thing that there's always something I was trying to figure out within my own life. So then, like, I guess I didn't like, there were times when I tried to write about people like different from me to some degree, but even then I was just like leaking myself. For me, like, even though the craft was important, I was just really trying to figure out something like within myself, whether I knew it or not.
Mm-hmm. So, what is this writing journey looks like for you? What have you discovered about yourself that you didn't know before? Is there any
Yeah.
are there any pieces that are more salient to you?
I'm trying to decide whether to or not to include any of my college pieces, because I'm like, those were kind of train wrecks. But some of them might have been formative train wrecks, is the thing. Yeah, I guess there's junior year I wrote like a more like personal piece about my relationship to math, and how like on edge I felt, and how I always felt like there were certain things I didn't feel comfortable with as like a female in math, whereas like it seems like a lot of the males in my like math classes always were so comfortable. For instance, one day someone basically said, why are you wearing that lipstick? Like this lipstick kind of looks like crushed berries. Like, why are you wearing this? And then and this was my like teaching fellow, like the teaching assistant for that course as well. And also he was basically saying, I don't get why this is so hard for you. This is so easy. This is like basic. And so I wrote
That's so mean, by the way.
Oh yeah, I think that is an example of something I was trying to figure out and process. And like, I think like that was probably like the first piece where like I was talking like very directly about my own life, and also like through the process of like writing it, like, and like learned how to mine something within my own life, like with more precision than I'd done previously. Like there's something where I like realized, for me, like for a lot of these experiences, like if it's something very difficult. If you are too emotional or woe is me in a particular way, then it kind of isn't a good, it's not fun to, maybe not fun, but like it's not, doesn't make for the best reading experience for the reader. And so I think there's a way in which I learned how to be a little more restrained with the way I like write about very difficult topics, less flowery and less like, oh, like this was the saddest experience of my life. And then figure out a way to like make writing about difficult topics like a lot more readable.
Mm-hmm.
And then another very salient piece, I think, for me, or like in terms of very formative for me, was senior year. I was taking a class with this very well-known author who writes a lot about the environment and psychedelics and other things. And his class was a personal essay class. He encouraged me to write about something I was curious about, which was like blinders I had toward my boyfriend Alex's work. For context, like he like really cares about AI safety, and this was before ChatGPT like really popularized like late last year and this year. And this whole piece was basically like me questioning why I couldn't take this notion of like AI safety super seriously, or why I had a lot of blinders to it. So I didn't know what I was expecting from that class, but from that class I realized one thing I'm very good at is worrying on the page, just like dumping my like train of thought on a page and having it be very like precise, and then using myself as a proxy for everyone else. So it's like, if I'm talking about these like large topics, I should do it in a way that's very relatable. And I think that like class taught on personal essays taught me some of those foundational skills. Like, like one thing, like people want to read like perspectives from like that are more everyday to some degree. Like I think the everyman was the term that was used. Basically, like, you know, if we're reading personal essays, we want to read from someone who is a little curious, like doesn't necessarily know the scene, and is like through their perspective, like the reader gets to like go along and learn things too.
You mentioned that you found out through the process of writing, you started to learn how to be like restraining your own emotion in writing. Is that a correct way to put it?
Yeah, or like how to present difficult situations while capturing the extent of the emotion isn't like wallowing per se.
Uh-huh. I resonated with that a lot. For me, writing is a way of self-expression and also making sense of my struggles like throughout a creative journey. And I remember when I wrote the first piece, so my writing journey only started last year, basically. And so I'm still in the process of like learning how to write while wanting to express and wanting to sort out my own life situation. And I get so frustrated when my readers want, or other writers give me feedback of like, I need to, like, no one wants to read your really sad stories because it just make people feel bad. And so I started to like, okay, think about, okay, how do I frame it in a way that I can express myself, but also deliver the point. Like I don't want to hide my suffering, but I also don't want to just make people feel really bad reading it. I still find it's a very intricate balance. So how do you do that? Like, what are some ways that you found out throughout the way that enable you to express yourself, but also like as you define a more readable piece for readers? Can I put it that way?
Yeah. Well, first off, I think like about your life, like I would read your sad stories. I mean, that's one thing I would say. Like, I think, like, I would read Angie's sad stories.
Wait, why?
I mean, I feel like writing is not. I feel like there's something where I'm like, I feel like people like. Some people want to read the sad story. Like I feel like you shouldn't be like protecting people from like the. Like, or we shouldn't be protecting people from like the darkest parts of our own lives. So like there's something where I'm like, okay, if people don't want to read sad stories or like how much you struggled like during like as a kid or like during any part of your life, like that's their choice. But there's something where I'm like, I like care very much about people like being able to write like about the darkest parts of themselves or like their lives. Like that's something I really care about. I think like you, Angie, like are very much doing like a service to the world if you don't shy it. Like if you can share that writing, like not everyone will read it, but I think that's like something just like that's so important. A lot of people shy away from those parts of themselves or like don't want to talk about those parts of their lives. But like it's like so much is in the darkness that if we like shine a light on it, even if it's like incredibly uncomfortable, like I think often really like liberating things can happen. But in terms of like, so I guess like that's, I think it is important not to shy away like from like dark shit. But at the same time, like I guess there are ways to like do it a little better. And I have learned this because I used to write things that no one would read. And sometimes I still feel like I'm doing that a lot. I think like, for instance, like with my piece about like my dad's abuse, I think what I try to do in that piece or in other pieces is to keep things like, to keep my own feelings of sadness outside of the piece. And it's just like, and so there's a way in which like, when I write about this thing like that happened to me as a kid, and I'm not really saying I feel sad or I'm crying that much. I mean, sometimes I still do say it a lot. But when like, I just like say like, oh, this thing happened, like, oh, like I had this very difficult argument with my dad and like we were both yelling at each other. These are like the very hurtful things we were saying, and I give it like very explicit examples of that. Then I don't need to tell the reader I'm sad or that this was like the worst experience of my life. They feel that it was the worst experience of like my life through reading it. And so I guess like it's like rather than like focusing on my own emotions, it's like if I get super, super detailed about like that experience, then like the like feelings will be evoked without me needing to say it.
When I read that piece, I was like several emotions come up. And I think like as you said, I feel really, really sad. Maybe the first emotion is angry, and then when I see the situations happen, like unfolding throughout the essay, at the end of essay, and after a few days, I just feel very sad for you and for people who experience similar things like me. But I also feel like it just made me feel you're such a courageous person in sharing all this so nakedly. Can I say that nakedly? And yeah. I think when I was wanting to write about certain things, for example, like I remember in one of the articles I talk about like no one can love us because like I think like after having my own kid, I realized a lot of trauma I think I have as a kid is basically because of who I am, not because of how my parents were treating me before. Like it's almost like I came into the world with a filter, or as in like Vipassana's master Goenka said, like we have so much unresolved karma in our previous life, and when we come into this life, we have that sankara with us, and we are here in this life to solve the unresolved karma we had before. And so if we don't solve it in this life, we'll bring it to the next life. Okay, I'm going on tangent here, but I think I realized that no matter like even though my parents is 100% like 99% perfect parent, the way the framework I brought to this world to perceive about my life already decided what I'm going to remember and not remember about my parents. And so I think like because of that, when I started writing about no one can love us like we love ourselves, I tried to argue that only us can give us the love we wanted. And in a few passages, I tried to talk about the verbal abuse my mom had towards me. Like she will often she will not call me a bitch, but she will say she's a bitch in a way that she can make me feel bad. And those are the emotional salient moments for me that I wrote in the article. And my partner read it and basically like no one wants to read that. And so the whole like a few paragraphs of description into details about how the type of verbal abuse my mom gave me basically condensed into one sentence that lightly touch it. That I basically just say, I didn't get the love I wanted as a child. And so I feel like, okay, fine. At least I get to write it out in the first place so I can clear some of the shit out and do another version to the world. And I was so convinced that people don't want to read the real stuff that is going on until I read your piece. There is a very powerful catharsis moment for me when I read through your piece. The just understanding that this suffering is not individualized to me. It's like a shared suffering of many people, like many Chinese kids growing up in Chinese families. And just knowing that this is a shared human experience give me so much liberation. I heard a lot of people say that shame only happen when you are experiencing the same thing by yourself. One example is like when the Body Keep Scores authors talk about like COVID, it says it's a trauma experienced by by most human beings. So people didn't individualize it as a shame. But if you have a disease that only you have, then you might bear a lot of shame through it. And so reading your piece, it's very, very sad, but also gave a lot of people a lot of powers, I think.
Thanks. I was like tearing up hearing you talk. Like I just got. Wow. Yeah. I'm really grateful.
Aww.
Thanks, Angie.
I think like knowing you, so Valerie and I met in the same coaching group. At the very beginning, before I joined the coaching group, I heard Paul talked about you before, and I was so intimidated. I was like, what? This girl, she's so cool. She's so smart. Like, I'm going to be in a coaching group with her. I'm going to be like looking like a fob, and I'm not creative and all this stuff. And when I joined a coaching call, like, I think every session was just like a mind blowing session for me. It was like, so like knowing all the people, like what they're capable of doing, especially you, but you can't see how brilliant you are. Maybe I think you rationally know how brilliant you are, but you have so much self-doubt about like, are you really creative? And like, it's just so sad for me to see that you are not loving yourself. And I think for me, like a lot of stuff that I realized after reading your piece is I'm not loving myself either. But growing up in Taiwan, I sort of rationalize all the abuse I have as a kid, like the physical abuse. They're just like casually lashes us with their like bamboo sticks or like belts. And those like my grandpa will always just like call me like your piece of shit and like you motherfucker and all this stuff. And she called all my aunties and uncles that. And we sort of took it as normal. Oh, there's just grandpa being grumpy. And I think I only started to struggle with it after I'm exposed to another culture where this type of abuse is not allowed. I started to have this anger and frustration and depression coming from like, why do I have to suffer from all those abuse? But at the same time, I'm not allowing myself to be angry because I think for us growing up as a kiddo of Chinese family, like we still need the love from our parents. So we keep rationalizing those abuse. That okay, they love us, they abuse us, but they must coming from a place of love. No, they're a piece of shit. No, but they love us. I shouldn't be hating them. And so this is like a long. I now realize it's a lifelong process of disentangling all the emotions and struggles. But for you growing up in the States, like you, even though going back home, you are with your parents from Chinese culture, but going outside home, you know that that's not a behavior that is allowed in a society. So it must be even more of a contrast for you and like a more, like a, how do you say, like something that is even harder for you to accept or understand.
I don't think it's like one of those things where I'm like, even also for me, like, I noticed that even now having, like, like, written that piece and, like, really tried to, like, look at a lot of the, like, abuse, it's, like, even now it's still, like, I want to, like, paper over it a little bit.
You
Yeah,
you
like,
are.
I think, yeah, like, it's just, like, crazy because, like, I think that's something that, like, is also very strong, where I'm, like, I feel very defensive of, like, my parents and very protective of them. But, and also, like, yeah, it was very difficult for me in, like, elementary school, especially, like, the years where my dad was, like, very, like, the years where, like, my dad was, like, the most abusive. I think that was, like, 4th grade for me. Like, and I just remember this, like, shame. Because I thought, like, my family was, like, uniquely fucked up. And that was so difficult. Because, like, it was just, like, I remember, like, one time, like, my dad came to, like the elementary school office and tried to visit me. And, like, I did not want to tell my teacher, like, I do not want to visit him. I feel terrible visiting him. And, like, I think there's something where I'm, like, now I can see, like, oh, like, that must have been, like, a lot, really difficult to hold as a kid. Like, I'm, like, very, like, I think I'm, like, very impressed with myself as, like, an elementary schooler for just, like, managing the way that, like, my younger self did. And now, like, yeah, I think, and then, like, for many years I repressed a lot of it, and it's still repressing a decent amount. But I remember, like, in college for me, that was when I felt super angry. Because then, like, there was a lot of pressure that my parents put on me in high school to keep doing math. When, like, I wanted to write, and there were all these things. But, like, I just remember in college, like, being so angry, yeah. Because, like, it was just, like, there was just, like, so much where I just felt, where I had, like, a how could you do this to me, like, sense. Or, like, and I just was, especially in college, where I was just like, oh, like, you, like, this is terrible, like, how could you, like, this is Thanksgiving break, how could you still be doing this, like, and, yeah, just, like, it was very, yeah, I guess it was just, like, very hard, and, like, it was also one of those things where I was also, like, in college, like, why am I thinking about this, like, all the time? Like, why, like, everyone else is, like, thinking about their career and stuff, and here I am, like, it's, like, a Thanksgiving evening, or, like, it's, like, Christmas break, and I'm just so pissed at my parents. Like, it just felt like I was living in a completely different world from, like, a lot of other people. And, of course, now, like, I think there's something where I realized, like, I was certainly not the only one to have, like, very difficult times, like, even in college. But, like, in the moment, like, there was just so much shame. It really felt, there was, like, a lot of shame, and there was a lot of anger, and there was a lot of ways in which I just, like the pure raw emotion, like, that was just, like, a lot of, like, sometimes whenever my parents would get, like, parents and I would have, like, arguments, I would just, like, so upset.
For me, like, the first time I studied in the States was in junior year in university, and before that I was so, sometimes, like, sometimes I really wish I never came to the States at all and just live in my own bubble in Taiwan, because in that type of environment I really thought I have the best family ever. The abuse was really not considered as abuse for me. I thought of them as jokes, and I think of them as fun. Yeah, and I think of those childhood,
Oh
like,
my god.
it is like, so, like, even the casual abuse from the school, like, if we don't behave well, and, Taiwan, so for people who don't know about Taiwan, is a very militarized country. It doesn't mean that we have soldiers march on the street all the time, but everything we do as a kid, like, we have a military figure in this, in every school, to discipline kids' behavior. And, like, when we are not behaving well, like, for example, for us, a full score on a test is 100, and if you get 90, basically the teacher will every time after the test is over, they will call every single person's student's name and their score, and then you line up in the class, and then you put your hands out. And so if you're 10 scores less than 100, then you get 10 hits. And so like it's just something that we talk about as a college student. It's fun. It's like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, I got hit 60 times one time when we were a kid, and that's so funny, haha. And we rationalize it so much that even till this day, when I see like casual violence joke and stuff, I still laugh at it. And Paul will be like so shocked, like, you shouldn't laugh at this. This is very sad. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just so used to it. And I was so used to it in a way that all those abuse are not abuse for me. I only see the bright side of family. Oh, our family doesn't live together, but we love each other. And my mom cares about me so much. She sent me all these texts. And only after I study and live in the States, I considered those love. I started to consider those love as a form of control. And I started to see those verbal abuse and physical abuse like insufferable for me. And that creates such a tension for me and my family. And yes, it's good to have the taste of freedom, but the taste of freedom also just started to create this discrepancy between how I perceive my reality. And sometimes I just wish I never, maybe my life will be better if I'm just a happy dumb kid in Taiwan.
Do you wish that now? Like right now? Or do you still wish like, I wish I didn't know?
I still wish. And I think like I listened to a podcast about is it called stumbling upon happiness? Is it basically how happy you are is not because of the reality, it's because how much expectation you have for yourself. And if I'm always in Taiwan and I have zero expectation about being treated in a more liberal and like ethical, not ethical, like a more liberal way, then I will never be disappointed about the way my parents treated me. And so this is interesting. I thought through the process of writing, especially through my pregnancy, where I feel so happy about the whole thing. I thought I resolved all my family trauma. And I thought like, from now on, my mom and I, we are inseparable. We are like the bestie in the world. I have so much love for her. She has so much love for me. And until they visited me in the States, and every drama just brought to an extent that just made me realize I was just being so naive. This is never gonna be solved. Never gonna be solved. But still at the same time, I'm still trying to rationalize, but they love me. It's because they love me. They do all the things to me as a kid. And I wanted to revise my memory so much. Like I wanted to believe that I have a good childhood. I want to believe that the abuse was actually not that important. I wanted to believe that I was actually loved. But I think the reality is just my childhood is a mix of love and real verbal abuse. And the more I try to erase the memory or trying to rationalize it, the more pain I have. And I might not in this lifetime ever solve this problem. And the only way out is to accept the fact that it's a it's a mix of everything, and only allow that fact to exist that I can really start it to really reconcile with myself.
Yeah.
That not making any sense at all.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I think I resonate a lot with that. Like, I think there's, for me, like, I also, it's like this weird thing, because, like, even though I've, like, you know, written, like, clearly I've written a lot about my dad now, but it's, like, one of those things where, like, in my day-to-day, sometimes I just want to, like, I very much want to block it out, or, like, for, like, kind of rationalize, like, yeah, like, you know, I only get hit, like, once a year, or, like, sometimes less than that, so it doesn't really matter, and, like, yeah, the yelling is, like, fine, it's just, like, kind of a cost you pay for being Asian, like, there's that is also still so strong in me. But I think for me, it's also, like, but clearly, like, I think at some point, like, I just hit, like, some sort of breaking point, where it's, like, my body, or, like, I feel terrible when I do that. like, I'm just, like, not functional anymore if I, like, keep pretending like this didn't also happen to me, even though, like, I don't want to look at it. Like, I think there's something where it's, like, I think for me, like, yeah, I also, I guess for myself, like, I can only get closer to, like, forgiving my parents or like, having a lot of compassion and love for them if I can see through everything. Like see things through to the end, like, as in being like, oh, what they did was also really bad, and also what they endured themselves was probably, like, really bad. But I feel like you can only get to, like, the, oh, I can have compassion for my parents because I can see how they struggle, like, if you kind of, like, can acknowledge your own struggle and, like, not paper over it.
Mm-hmm. You said that you actually feel a little bit lost as a creator. How does that happen?
Oh, okay, let me provide a little context to the listeners. Basically, like, I was doing a mid-year review, like, last week. It was just basically like, oh, and it basically made you, like, one thing that it made you do was like, okay, what did you do in June? What did you do in May? Like, did you expect these things? Did you, like, did you feel like you accomplished your goals? And, like, I was going back, like, from June to this past January, and my main takeaway was, wow, I had no goals. I was not trying to do anything. My life just happened. Yeah, and I think there's something where I realized, like, I'm in this state now where, like, on the one hand, I could just be like, yes, I want 10,000 Substack subscribers, or, like, I want to make $10,000 a month from, like, writing one day, or something like that. And, like, I want to, like, get big readership, and I want to do this, and I want to collaborate, and I want to, like, do all these things. But I kind of just realized, like, it's really weird, because even though I say I want those things, I don't know if I actually want them, and I have no idea what I'm doing with my Substack. So I guess there's this feeling where I'm just like, I don't know what I want, like, from my Substack, or what I'm trying to do anymore. Like, there's something where, like, yes, I feel like in the past 6 months, like, one goal was just to become a better writer, and I feel like just, like, through working on the essays that I've been working on, I've gotten to be a much better writer.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, working with, like, Santi Ruiz, he was this writing coach. He's really great. I also, like, have been doing a few sessions with him. That was really helpful. But, like, yeah, like, I think there's something where I'm like, what is valspals.substack.com? I don't know. And, like, what am I trying to get from it? Like, am I trying to, like, get a readership one day? Do I want to quit my job one day? Like, I just don't know. Like, I think I just feel like I don't really have a direction, and I'm just drifting into whatever happens next.
Is your parents' voice saying, like, Valerie, if you're writing, you better get $10,000 subscribers. You better make this much money in one day. Otherwise, you're not a successful writer.
It's hard to say how much of that is my parents versus how much of that is me.
Like, your own desire.
Like, yeah, or, like, as in, like, or, like, you know, just, like, growing, like, being in, like, a very, like a prominent Ivy League school where, like, you know, like, they're already, like, YouTubers are like, how did I get into this school? And they have, like, 2 million subscribers and stuff like that. And it's just like, oh, okay. The thing that really drives me a lot of the time, sometimes, is kind of, okay, it doesn't drive me, but the thing that haunts me is, like, I think about my, like, high school, like, you know, one day I'll have, like, a 10-year high school reunion, or one day I'll have, like, a 5-year college reunion, and they're like, oh, what have you been doing with your life, Valerie? And I'm like, oh, you know, I've been working on this thing called Substack, and, like, I've been writing, and, like, you know, I've just been working on some essays, and they're like, oh, like, can you quit your job? Like, what are you trying to do? And, like, oh, like, and I'm like, what have you been doing? And they're like, oh, I got promoted to partner at McKinsey, and I'm like, oh, well, I've been working on a Substack. Like, I just have so much, like, imagined shame from, like, wanting to be legitimate in a particular way, in, like, the status way. And then I'm just like, who's coming up with this? Clearly not this imagined person. Clearly it's me. Yeah.
I'm
So
curious.
I guess I feel directionless.
So I'm
Oh, keep going.
curious if you are at a 10-year reunion and then your friend is your classmates is a partner at McKinsey, and then you tell them you have 100,000 subscribers on your Substack. Do you feel successful? Is it comparable to a partner in McKinsey way or no?
I think I would feel like I passed a test. Like, oh, what legible thing have you been doing? I don't know if Substack is legible, but like the 100,000 certainly is. Like, it's like one of those things where it's just like, I think I like imagine, and I can't tell like where this judgment is sourced from, but if I'm just like, if I think about myself and I'm just like I just don't want to feel shame for like having done this illegible thing.
Hmm.
This is part of it.
Man, I don't know. I don't know if that will. Okay, so even if you brought out like 1,000 subscribers in that conversation, they probably still don't know what Substack is, and they're probably like, fine, whatever. It's like
Yes, I agree.
I want to share this. So like we went to my husband's is 10-year MBA reunion, and there are a lot of not a lot of there are some McKinsey partners sitting at the table, and we just feel like a complete weirdo. Doesn't matter if he published a book, doesn't matter how many subscribers he has. The truth is just like people are living their life. They might feel it's weird, but whatever to them, they have their own struggle as a McKinsey partner, and we have our own challenges as creators. I don't think we will ever pass. I think if you want to choose a non-default path, this is something that you just need to face your whole life.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that. I like it's something I know, but it's something I don't necessarily want to think about. Or I'm like, oh, this thing just might never go away.
Likewise.
Like no matter what dinner party I go to, there might always be a moment of fear where I'm like, oh yeah, so the thing I care about most is like these essays I've been working on. Like, oh, like yeah, like just like that moment, like that might never go away. I might always feel like slightly terrible when I talk about it.
It's funny. So like,
Just
I
trying to
feel the same way too, and because of that, I want my daughter to pick a default path. I know I won't like push her, but it just made me feel so uncomfortable that if she grew up to be a weirdo like us, then she will be treated like a weirdo, and then she will be feeling so out of place like I do too. And but like my husband just told me, you have to give up that. It's just not practical. Like she will model her behavior based on what her parents do, and we are both weirdos, so she definitely is gonna be a weirdo in her own friends groups too. So we need to help her how to think about the world. And I was like, man, it's such a metaphor for me. Like, how come like I never thought about like the framework of thinking about the world? I'm just in that framework and thinking about myself as a weirdo and feeling so uncomfortable every time like I have to face a situation when my friends or my family are in a very successful default path. I'm just like weird and feeling uncomfortable in that gathering.
Oh, I know that feeling. Yeah, like I guess I also find it really funny that because I view you and like Paul as so like quote unquote like comfortably off the default path that I guess like I find it kind of funny or something. Like and to some degree reassuring where I'm like, oh, you actually have a pattern similar to like the pattern I have. I don't even have kids. Like yet. But I'm like always just like, oh, like it would be so great if like I'm constantly worrying about like, oh, like if I go off the default path, then my kid will go off the default path, and like this is going to bring so much uncertainty to our lives. Like, how will I ever deal with this?
Yep, that's me.
So I guess it's reassuring that you have that.
That's me. That's like,
Just
yeah. I mean, so one-on-one conversation, I can be like very talkative, but like usually I'm just like very quiet. But every time I hear you say something, I'm like, man, this is so me. Like I was like, oh my god, I wish Valerie knows that this not just her struggle. Like everyone struggles with the same thing. Not everyone, at least me too. So I wanna ask you. So in in my like pre-interview survey, you said one of the things you want to talk about is being an Asian female creator. Could you tell me like why this stand out to you as something you want to talk about?
I think there's something where I'm like, I think to some degree I am like isolating myself from like going to meet other like Asian female creators. I think I guess I've also just been kind of antisocial in the past like year or so maybe that's part of it. But I guess there's like something where I'm like, these are also the labels that I have like for my own identity. Like some of them like Asian female creator, but there's also something where I'm a lot. It's like this interesting thing where I'm like, I think like whether we know it or not, like all of our experiences, like being Asian and female and a creator, like we probably went through a lot of like stuff as a kid, like with high odds, and like there's just like a lot like in the cultural background that like sometimes is like just going beneath the surface. And I guess there's something where I'm like, one of the things for me is just like, oh, like it. I guess like there's something where I'm like, even though I'm not really talking about being Chinese explicitly, like I feel like that's like always informing my point of view and my decisions, like even with like my creative journey. And it's just like feels like something where like it feels important for like that to be acknowledged, or like and for like me to like find more Asian females to like go on the journey with, even though I haven't been very like proactive per se yet about like super like trying to find more like Asians.
Yeah, there's something
Like I guess I care a lot about finding like Asian females whose like work is like super like vivid and like alive and like, but it's like one of those things where it's like also a little hard to talk about. I don't know why.
Yeah, I guess I resonated with because you don't want, like when you make friends, you don't want to bond with people through suffering. Like, yeah, we're both abuse survivors, let's hang. It's just weird. But you know,
Yeah.
but you also know it's that sure thing could be tricky. I mean, like first of all, I'm like surprised you wrote that as one of the things you want to talk about. But then I'm surprised again by myself of being surprised after reading your stuff. And I think for the first layer, I still think of you as my stereotype of like very successful Asian American who wouldn't put Asian on top of their identity. Like, cause that's how I feel when I first started in the States. Like, I no longer consider myself as Angie, not even Angie, like Yusho talking to other people. I only see myself as an Asian female talking to other people, and then it's me talking. Or sometimes the me never get through that giant box of Asian female. So for me, it's because I'm super fobby, or I wasn't even fresh off the boat. I would just lay over in the States, and then I'll go back to Taiwan in the future. and for Valerie, who's like has such a shining default path like labels, I just can't. I just still surprised to see you also put that in your description.
I think that's like something where I'm like, it's also something where I'm like, I don't actually know how to identify. There's like this weird thing with Asian for me at the moment. And probably like a lot of my life where like, I guess I didn't really identify with Asian because I was like, well, I don't want to talk about I don't like. There's something where I was like, but I don't really know if I want to be associated here. I'm like, I don't know, just on the one hand, yes, we probably have a lot of shared history and stuff like that, but on the other hand, I don't know if this is the label, the label that identifies me best. But I think there's something where I'm I think I am also just still trying to work through what that label means to me, or why I find it significant. But there's something where it's just I don't really even feel Asian. I feel such a bad Asian, honestly. Where I'm yeah, I don't actually speak Mandarin super well, and also I guess maybe I don't have that much filial piety, and also I don't know, it's very weird. But at the same time, I'm also I guess I do feel kinship with other Asians when they're especially if they have difficult relationships with their parents. I guess there is something shared here.
It's an episode about identity struggle. Who am I? We're shouting into our existential crisis.
Yeah, kind of.
Talk about so now that we're talking about existential crisis, do you want to share about the ayahuasca retreat you had last year?
I think that one of the things that informs my writing to some large degree, whether I know it or not, is in ayahuasca plant medicine experience that I did last June, in Peru. The temple, the retreat center is called the Temple of the Way of Light, and they're the reputation is that they're super clean, energetically, and they have a phenomenal reputation within the ayahuasca medicine space. I think that's one of the formative things for me, because I guess there's something where I was I guess before I had gone, Alex had gone a few times and was telling me you have to go, Valerie, this is life changing, blah blah blah. He was telling me all these stories, and I was just what do you mean you could just cure a lot of your deepest wounds in 2 weeks? That just sounds so that just sounds BS. It sounds too good to be true. And then I talked to some other former participants who had said stuff it was 10 years of therapy in one night. It's eating chocolate if you've only had saltine crackers your whole life. And it was so animated. And I was just what the hell is this? There's no way. What is happening? But I ended up going for a variety of reasons. I think one of them secretly was just I was also feeling pretty bad. There were a lot of stuff where I felt I think at that moment I was not feeling I did not have that much suicidal ideation, but I would say December of between maybe September and January, just September of 2021 and January of 2022, I was just, that was very I was there was a period of time where I would always be oh, well, I can't get out of bed, and honestly, I don't see the point of going to class, or I don't see the point of existing actually. But I kind of was also just but I kind of managed. I don't know how I managed to get through those 4 months or something. But at some point, I think after I basically confronted my parents about something, then I felt a lot. I was just oh, I guess I can. All right, I guess I do have some motivation to live my life now, and I don't want to shit on my parents in any way, but I guess for me something that was very vital was just being able to tell my parents I'm going to live my life, I'm going to make my own mistakes, and you can't stop me from making my own mistakes, even if you don't like it, and that. So that was one thing that was leading up to it, and then when I got to Peru, like, I think there's something where I was just like, well, like, one of the things where I lost, like, didn't really think would happen, like, or it was just like, I don't even think that I can, like, solve my, like, mental angst in any way, so I'm not even gonna hope for it, or I'm not even gonna ask for it. But one of the things that, like, happened, like, was, like, during my, like, second ceremony, like, one thing that's important to know about these, like, ceremonies is that they're, like, so you're, like, literally in the retreat center, that you're literally, like, in Peru, in the Amazon jungle, like, literally in the jungle. Like, in order to get there, you walk for an hour through the jungle, and then you get to the retreat center, and like, very central to, like, this retreat center and, like, the indigenous, like, it is, like, the Shipibo healing tradition. So Shipibo are, like, indigenous tribe in Peru, and they have been, and, like, they have, like, very deep knowledge of, like, the plant, and, like, a lot of the healers, like, they might start, like, training, like, when they're, like, 8 years old or something. And they sing these things called, like, Icaros, and, like, I don't exactly know, like, too much about it, but basically, like, when you're in the ceremony and when you're, like, doing the medicine, they're singing these, like, directed, like, individualized songs to you. And what's really crazy is, like, because, like, before I got there, I was like, oh my god, like, what is this? Like, I was a little like, how could this be possible? Like, how could they, like, what are they actually doing? But what's really weird is, like, for instance, I was, like, during, like, one of my ceremonies, like, I was like, oh, like, I wonder what they actually do. Like, what does this thing actually do? And then, like, in that moment, the, like, healer came by, and the minute they started singing, I started puking. So I was just like, oh my god, this person is so skilled. Like, this is, like, actually, like, definitive evidence for me that they're doing something very, very, like, very real that I just don't understand yet. Or it may never understand, but they're doing something legit. But back to the ceremony, sorry, I'm going to tangent. Like, I think, like, the second ceremony was probably the most salient, where, like, and basically, like, there's a sense where, like, so there was this, like, moment in the ceremony where, like, I felt very comforted and at peace, and, like, there was this, like, notion of something called, like, the jungle, and it was basically, like, I felt this large deer, and I was just like, oh, that's my jungle mother, like, this is, like, my true, like, soul's mother, like, I am, like, an earthly mother, but this is, like, this jungle controls a lot of things, and then, like, and, like, that's an important piece. So basically, like, later when I, like, after the ceremony ended, like, I thought I was sober, so I was like, oh, okay, let me just, like, go back to my room, and then, like, like, just, like, try to go to sleep now. And, like, I was not sober, and I basically was on my bed, like, unable to see anything for a while. And, like, I was just, like, I'd be on my bed, like, looking at my hand for a second, and then my hand would disappear, and then suddenly, like, be in this, like, very, like, hallucinatory space, and I was just like, oh my god, like, I can't get sober, like, this is all terrible. And, like, I think basically, like, I don't have a sense of time, but basically, like, I was in, like, there's very difficult state for, like, what felt like forever. I was just like, oh my god, I'm going to be here forever, where I can't get sober, and I was, like, crying, and I was really upset. I was just like, oh my god, I, like, can't see anything, I can't get sober, like, I feel awful. I don't know when this is going to end. Like, intellectually, I know this will end, but it doesn't feel like it. And, like, it got so... I also, at some point, like, just started screaming for help, because I just felt that, like, upset, or, like, that, like, scared, and, like, that, like, helpless. And then, like, later, like, and I think I'm building up to it, like, for a reason, I guess, or something. Or, like, basically, like one of the facilitators came to help me and stuff like that, and, like, and at some point I, like, realized, like, in the middle, like, after being helped and, like, or, like, like, and being told to drink a little bit of water, and, like, after, like, all this stuff, at some point I realized I was like, oh, this is all because, like, the reason why I'm having such a difficult time right now is because I, like, didn't value my life, isn't it? And, like, basically, like, in this dialogue, like, it basically, I had a dialogue with the medicine, like, the medicine was basically like, yeah, like, you just dude, Valerie, if you don't want to live, you don't have to live. But if you're going to live, you have to accept that there's difficult moments. And I was just oh, so this, the reason why the ceremony is so hard is because I need to actually commit, right? Commit to my own life. And basically the vegetation was yes, gotta commit to your life. And then I think so. And then I think after that at some point I became sober again, and I was just damn, I did not appreciate my life at all, whatsoever. Well, maybe not at all, but I really was thinking about my life completely wrong. I yes, rather than always oriented to why is my life not going the way I want, there's this actual thing of oh, I am just lucky to be alive in the first place. Very, very lucky. And so I think there's one level for this for this part where it's just oh, I guess I did not know that it sounds crazy that going to Peru for 2 weeks and ingesting a root some sort of concoction can help you look at some of the deepest, worst parts of your life, or of your darkest parts of yourself, but also be I guess I did not realize how I'd been approaching my life completely wrong. That was causing so much suffering.
What does committing to your life and appreciating your life mean to you now?
Yeah, I think it's something I'm still working on a lot, but it's one of those things where it's I think one of the biggest updates I made is just because something is scary doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. There's something where it's I think there is to some degree of no matter how difficult this is going to be, I am going to weather through whatever comes my way. Even if I turn into a sewer rat, or even if I have to be a little mouse, you just picking up the trash. There's something where it's just yes, I will do that. I am not going to just think about taking I am not going to just try to avoid my own issues. I am going to try to face my issues, even if it's hard, or even or just even if it's hard, no matter how low I get, no matter what, I am in it for the long run for myself. And I think I just didn't have that before, where a lot of the times if I'm in bed or something, I'm just oh, I don't know if I can keep living or something. There's a way in which I was not committed to myself. And now I'm oh, okay, well, revealed preference is at the end of the day, I'm choosing between committing to a very hard life versus not valuing my life. If I don't value my life, I better be actually willing to accept the consequences of not living one day. So at the end of the day, I do want to live no matter how hard it gets.
It's been almost a year since the retreat. How do you think the effect is now? Is it lasting?
Yes. Yeah. And I think the reason why it's lasted is because that experience got to the root of the issue. And the root of the issue is just for me, for my issue, it was I just got called out on whether or not I made bluff called out a bit, where the medicine with Mother Aya was basically saying if you don't have to live, you don't want to are you, so come on, man, what are you going to do? And so I think from there I that was just a wake up call for me, where I was oh, okay, I if I'm gonna do this thing called life, I better do this thing. I'm just not gonna look back. I'm just going to I'm just going to keep looking forward and just like keep trying. Yeah, I would say it's like very interesting to me also because I feel like that just made me. I was really worried beforehand that like doing this would make me like not functional for finance or like not a good like not very like yeah, like not functional for finance or like not functional for like everyday tasks. But I think that like single handedly is one of like the biggest like factors in my being able to just like go through like really difficult moments. Like sometimes like like a first job, I think like there's a lot of like transition that comes with it, and like I think if I hadn't gone to the Temple of the Lord or like gone to the jungle and like worked through the route, then it would have been very difficult. It would have been even harder.
When you think about your creative journey as a whole, were there things that you wouldn't dare to write about that you were comfortable writing about now?
I think I would say the things that feel shameful to me, like for instance, like my dad essay, I can't imagine myself having written last year. And like I think there are like other things that I'm trying to work on now. Like I don't know if it'll ever get published. Like if I'll ever publish it publicly, but like I think I'm trying to write like stuff about like romantic relationships or like and stuff of that in that realm, and like where I risk feeling very ashamed of myself. Yeah, I think that's something that I am comfortable with now. That I was trying to write about.
Oh man, isn't it? I feel like it's so unfair. I feel shame about, or even I feel shame writing about those stuff, and or like maybe now talking with you and thinking about one day it will be published. What will my family think? What will my friends think about me? What will people like on the internet who read my writing and never really know about who I am think about me? But isn't it? I just feel so unfair. Like first of all, we suffer through those shit, and then secondly, when we like open to the public that we actually suffered those shit, and we have to feel shameful about. Maybe it's just not fair.
Yeah, it's like hard. Like it was very. I think I like the reason why I was able to publish my dad essay to some degree was I was dissociating from the shame a lot because I was like, oh god, I can't look at it. I can't look at it. I can't look at it. Okay, let me just press publish. Oh, okay,
Aww.
okay, I'm gonna try to. Like yeah. It. I think it's hard. I think what also helped a bit though was just like it's like something where like I feel like just because there's shame doesn't mean it's negative to publish. Like there's something where just like like the risk of like my family finding out and like reacting negatively, like
Yeah, how do you
or
deal
like
with that?
people judging. I think there's something where I'm like a little bit of dissociation, but B like I think there is a commitment where I'm just like I care so much about this being talked about. Like it's really important. Like I think it's really important that like people read about like something that isn't really talked about and like read about like a perspective of like forgiveness and how to move towards it and transcending like really difficult like moments in your life where I'm just like that is why I share my experience because I think there is no matter like even if people find out and like react really poorly, get really triggered by it, like ultimately like the thing I am find is really important is just like other people being able to like feel liberated and reorient to their parents differently in a way that is like much more like like liberating on a soul level. So I guess there's something where I'm like, yep, like even if there's like in the world there are things that are like I will get like even if people react really negatively, ultimately like the thing I'm fighting for like just like is so much more important to me.
I think for me, a lot of shame come from like, it still come from one belief, which is like, is it because I'm a bad person that I don't deserve to be loved that those abuse come to me? And so when share my feelings about it with other people, I almost feel like, oh my god, they're gonna find out I'm just a person who doesn't deserve to be loved. And okay, so another thing, if you are watching the video, you might see me going through this emotional turmoil over the past like 1 minute. So I was gonna share that like the reason why I was able to talk about all this like family trauma is because I'm pretty sure that my parents don't know about my English Substack. At first, when I started writing, at first when I started writing in English, I was like, I'm not sure I want to write in English because I'm so much better expressing myself in Chinese. I'm so good at Chinese language. I'm so good at using those like, I'm so good at talking about my emotions in Chinese. But then I found it such a huge liberation to talk like a kid, to just like write in a very accessible language and knowing that my parents will never read my writing. So I can finally start to talk about my family trauma. And then, so as I wanted to share this with you on a podcast, I realized that they do listen to my podcast. And I was like, holy shit, am I going to go back to edit out all the stuff I talk about my parents? But I was like, maybe they see it's a English, because my parents don't speak English. Well, my mom doesn't speak English. My dad knows English and speak somewhat fluently, and I'm not sure if he will listen to this podcast, so maybe I should be at ease with it. But what if he does and I need to go back to editing, or we'll have a family like breakdown and all this stuff, and I was just like, now I'm just like, oh my god, what did I do to myself? Now I'm just like, finger crossed, I hope they will never listen to this podcast in their life. But it's not like I never talk about this in other English podcasts I just recorded. But I guess I think it's about like this thing about being Asian like in an Asian family, so we're always guessing what the other person think and like guessing how they feel throughout their life. We just never confronted our emotion, or at least my family. And so maybe it's a good way to start if they ever listen to and understand what we're talking about.
Oh, by the way, parents, here's this bomb that I've been dropping. Enjoy. Peace. Yeah. Yeah. I guess there's something where I'm kind of like, I'm like, it's open to question what will happen. Because I'm like, I don't know, like what I'll feel comfortable with. Yeah. I think there's something where like, I think on my end, like the thing is like, oh, like, yeah, my last name is removed from my like from all of my socials, and like, will I like, what will happen? Like, will people actually like? I'm kind of banking on my parents not like spending like 40 minutes listening to this, or like knowing about this, how to access this in the first place, or like any people in the Asian parent circles like spending like 40 minutes to listen to this. I think that's what I'm like kind of like, I'm like, oh, hopefully they just like, don't like listen, like then my like things are separate.
I had one episode before where the person has so much interesting story to share, but just absolutely doesn't want people to find out who he is. So I later just use a pseudonym for him. And yeah, that's something that we can do too. I mean, pseudonym in writing is a very famous thing to just liberate people to do whatever, to say whatever they want.
Yeah. I think there's also something where I'm like, it's like unclear, because I'm also just like I'm not like, I don't, maybe like if I took a pseudonym here, I feel like I'm also like, maybe I should change it to Mal's Pals at Substack.com. Like, I think that that's where I'm also like, okay, like, where do I draw the line? Like, at some point I should just like have it drawn somewhere. I think there's also something where, like, for me, like, it's, like, weird because, like, on the one hand, I'm like, oh my god, once my parents find out, stuff like that. But on the other hand, I'm also, like, I feel like it's also, like, one of those things where, like, I don't want to feel shame for this. Like, I feel like it's important to risk shame, because I feel like that's also, like, something I care about so much, where it's just, like, I feel like I don't want, like, there's something where, like, I care very much about, like, being able to, like, explore, like, very dark things and have people, like, understand that, like, even if I feel scared or something, ultimately I don't think it's something that we should be feeling shame, like, feeling shame about. Like, there's something where I'm like, yes, I could use a pseudonym here, or, like, yes, Angie, you could use a pseudonym, but there's also something very, like, there's a stance that you're taking by being Angie and talking about this, or there's a stance that I'm taking by being Valerie and talking about this. And so it's, like, one of those things where it's, like, I also, to some degree, I, like, very much care about, like, being able to talk about things, like, semi-publicly. And so it's like, well, we'll find out which one I choose.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your story today on your birthday. And as a closing question, what are you excited about now?
I think there's something where I'm like, one thing I am very excited about, I think in my, like, personal life or something, is just, like, I think, like, trying to just, like, have, like, really good relationships, like, friendships, like, romantically and otherwise. Like, I think there's something where I'm like, at the end of the day, that probably is something that, like, matters a lot. So, like, I want to, like, get better at, like, being generous to my friends and people I don't really know super well, and, like, being, like, a good partner and stuff like that. Excited to get better there. I am also, like, I don't know, I'm kind of like, there's gonna be a lot of chaos in the Val's Pals world. Not like, in terms of, like, my Substack creator journey, and, like, that's kind of scary, but also, like, realistically, I'm also pretty excited to see what happens. Like, who knows what's gonna happen? Like, I have no idea, but, like, that's very, like, exciting to me. I don't know, I guess, like, there's something where I'm like, I feel like I've become a lot less antisocial in the past, like, few months, and I'm, like, excited just to hang out with people and get to know people better and just, like, you know, like, support them and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, like, for instance, I'm, like, very excited to pester you to, like, you know, write more if you want, to, like, I like pestering people. I'm excited to pester more people.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story today, Valerie.
Thank you so much for asking me to be here. I'm, like, so honored.
Oh, I feel so honored too. And I will see you around.